Hello, my friends! Before we dive in, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our amazing stories. Today, I want to share with you the extraordinary tale of Cleopatra, the final queen of ancient Egypt. This isn't merely a simple history lesson, it is a thrilling journey back in time, packed with drama, power, romance, and ambition. Cleopatra remains one of the most legendary women in human history, and her actual life played out like a spectacular movie. So, sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy this incredible narrative. It is absolutely perfect for your English practice, and I promise you are going to love every single moment of it. Chapter 1. Cleopatra's early life. Over 2 millennia ago, in the year 69 BCE, a baby girl was born in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. This child was named Cleopatra VII, and she would eventually grow up to become a queen absolutely like no other. But long before she wore a crown, she was simply a young girl with massive dreams. Cleopatra was born into a prestigious royal bloodline known as the Ptolemaic dynasty. This family had controlled Egypt for many decades, yet they were not actually native to Egypt. Their origins traced back to Greece. Her ancestor, Ptolemy I, served as one of Alexander the Great's top generals and claimed the Egyptian throne after Alexander passed away. Thus, Cleopatra's heritage was a unique blend of Greek and Egyptian cultures. Her father was King Ptolemy XII, and while her mother might have been Cleopatra V, historians remain slightly uncertain about her exact identity. Growing up, Cleopatra lived in a magnificent palace filled with pure luxury. She had countless servants, gorgeous garments, and received the finest education possible. However, existing in a royal household was far from easy. Danger constantly lurked in the shadows. Family members frequently fought fiercely over power, sometimes even murdering one another to seize the throne. From a very young age, Cleopatra realized that knowledge equaled power. While the vast majority of women during her era received no formal schooling, Cleopatra studied intensely. She mastered numerous languages, including Greek, Latin, Egyptian, Hebrew. Legend claims she spoke at least 7 languages with complete fluency. This was incredibly rare and made her stand out tremendously. She was also deeply curious about the world, studying mathematics, science, literature, and politics. She desired to be far more than a ceremonial queen wearing a crown. She intended to be a highly intelligent and dominant ruler. Furthermore, she possessed a secret weapon: her incredible charm. Cleopatra wasn't just exceptionally smart, she radiated confidence. People claimed she had a mesmerizing voice that could instantly capture anyone's heart. Yet, her childhood wasn't entirely joyful. Her father, King Ptolemy XII, was considered a highly ineffective ruler. The Egyptian public disliked him, viewing him as weak and financially irresponsible. At times, Cleopatra's family was forced into exile just to stay alive. She learned early on that leadership meant constantly confronting enemies. When Cleopatra reached about 14 years old, her entire world shifted. Her mother vanished. Some claim she passed away naturally, while others suspect foul play. Her father fell severely ill, meaning Cleopatra would soon have to battle for her right to rule. Though just a teenager, she was already bracing herself to be queen. What truly separated Cleopatra from previous rulers was her profound affection for Egypt. Despite her Greek ancestry, she deeply honored Egyptian customs. She became the first Ptolemaic leader to actually learn the native Egyptian language, and she even associated herself with the goddess Isis, a deeply powerful figure in local mythology. By the time she blossomed into a young woman, Cleopatra was fully prepared to rule. Yet, commanding Egypt would prove immensely difficult. She faced adversaries both outside and inside her own family. She understood she had to remain courageous, brilliant, and tough. And so, the epic saga of Cleopatra's rise to absolute power truly begins. Chapter 2. Cleopatra becomes queen. Cleopatra was absolutely no ordinary young woman. From the exact second she was born, her ultimate destiny was to govern. However, securing her position as queen was anything but simple. It was a treacherous journey packed with severe danger, painful betrayal, and brilliant strategies. Let me explain exactly how Cleopatra officially became the Queen of Egypt. When she turned 18, her father passed away. In his final will, he decreed that Cleopatra would inherit the Egyptian throne, but she could not rule it alone. She was legally forced to share her supreme power with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was a mere 10 years old at the time. Yes, in ancient Egyptian culture, it was totally normal for siblings to co-rule, even at very young ages. But Cleopatra had zero desire to divide her authority. She firmly believed she was far more capable, educated, and intelligent than her little brother. She had spent her life mastering languages, global history, and complex politics, whereas he was simply a child, lacking any real-world experience. Cleopatra fully understood she needed to seize total control if she truly wanted to defend Egypt and lead it exactly as it deserved. Initially, Cleopatra attempted to cooperate with her young brother, but very quickly, their royal advisors began conspiring against her. These advisors absolutely hated the concept of an independent, highly intelligent woman controlling Egypt. They vastly preferred Ptolemy XIII to hold all the authority because a child was significantly easier to manipulate. Almost overnight, Cleopatra's situation became incredibly perilous. She was forcefully driven out of the grand royal palace and had to escape into the harsh desert. Picture this dramatic scene: Cleopatra, the completely rightful queen of Egypt, wandering through the scorching, barren desert alongside only a handful of fiercely loyal supporters. She possessed no palace, no military force, and no actual throne. But Cleopatra was certainly not the type of person to just surrender. During her bitter exile, she began crafting a brilliant counterattack. She realized she could not reclaim her stolen throne completely by herself. She desperately needed massive assistance, and she needed to act rapidly. Fortunately, right around this exact time, an immensely powerful Roman military general named Julius Caesar arrived on Egyptian shores. Caesar was unarguably one of the most renowned and influential figures on Earth, and Cleopatra immediately spotted a golden opportunity. She resolved to meet Caesar face to face, but she recognized she needed to execute something spectacular to capture his full attention. She couldn't just casually stroll into the royal palace, as her vicious enemies would instantly assassinate her. Therefore, she devised an incredibly bold and ingenious tactic. One late evening, Cleopatra instructed her most trusted servant to roll her up tightly inside a massive carpet. Yes, a literal carpet. The servant then confidently carried this heavy carpet straight into Caesar's private quarters, claiming it was a special gift. Once the rug was carefully unrolled, Cleopatra magically emerged, looking absolutely breathtaking and radiating total confidence. Just imagine Caesar's immense shock when this stunning, highly articulate young woman suddenly appeared from inside a rolled-up rug. Cleopatra conversed with Caesar using immense charm and sharp intellect. She explained her unfair struggles, her profound devotion to Egypt, and her grand visions of becoming a legendary queen. Caesar was utterly captivated. He realized instantly that Cleopatra was not merely physically gorgeous, she was also a strategic genius with limitless ambition. Caesar officially agreed to assist Cleopatra in taking back her stolen crown. Working closely together, they engineered a military strategy to utterly crush Ptolemy XIII and his corrupt advisors. Cleopatra's rivals simply stood zero chance against the overwhelming, combined might of Cleopatra and Caesar. Following a wildly fierce conflict, Ptolemy XIII was conclusively defeated, and Cleopatra was triumphantly reinstated as the sole queen of Egypt. However, she wasn't just content with sitting on the throne. She passionately wanted Egypt to rise as a dominant, highly respected global power once more. She collaborated heavily with Caesar to fortify her nation, launching innovative public policies, expanding international trade, and forging an incredibly solid diplomatic bond between Egypt and the Roman Republic. Chapter 3: Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra was now the undisputed Queen of Egypt, but her daily life was anything but peaceful. She had successfully reclaimed her royal throne with the vital assistance of Julius Caesar. Yet, their fascinating dynamic was not strictly about political maneuvering. It quickly evolved into a profound tale of romance, fierce ambition, and deadly risk. She desired more than just domestic rule. She aimed to transform her homeland into an unstoppable force respected globally. She clearly understood that keeping Caesar closely by her side was the perfect way to make those lofty dreams a reality. Following the violent civil war, Cleopatra and Caesar spent massive amounts of time together. She deeply admired his military brilliance, undeniable strength, and strategic mind. In return, Caesar was completely enchanted by Cleopatra's stunning beauty, magnetic charm, and razor-sharp intellect. Although there was a significant age gap, Caesar was roughly 52 years old. While Cleopatra was merely 21, their emotional and intellectual bond was unbreakable. Cleopatra graciously invited him to remain in Egypt, and he happily accepted. Together, they toured the breathtaking streets of Alexandria, took luxurious cruises down the sweeping Nile River, and intensely discussed their mutual visions for the future. Cleopatra proudly displayed Egypt's majestic culture and ancient history. Caesar was thoroughly amazed. He realized Egypt wasn't just endless sand and stone pyramids, but a staggeringly wealthy and mighty nation overflowing with potential. During this romantic period, Cleopatra became pregnant. In the year 47 BCE, she successfully delivered a baby boy, whom she officially named Ptolemy Caesar. However, the general public affectionately referred to him as Caesarion, which directly translates to Little Caesar. Cleopatra firmly believed that young Caesarion would eventually bridge the gap between Egypt and Rome, forging one supreme, unstoppable global empire. Unfortunately, their romantic bliss was destined to be short-lived. Their highly publicized relationship triggered massive political headaches. Countless Roman citizens severely despised the thought of their great general being so intimately tied to a foreign monarch. They grew incredibly paranoid that Cleopatra was secretly plotting to conquer the Roman Republic by manipulating Caesar. Eventually, Caesar had to travel back to Rome, but he absolutely refused to leave Cleopatra behind. Instead, he formally invited her to accompany him. Cleopatra, always exceptionally bold and utterly fearless, eagerly agreed. She journeyed to Rome alongside little Caesarion and an outrageously magnificent royal entourage. Just picture the sheer spectacle. Cleopatra parading into the heart of Rome featuring solid gold chariots, incredibly exotic wildlife, and stunningly dressed Egyptian attendants. While residing in Rome, Cleopatra was housed in a spectacularly luxurious private villa gifted by Caesar. She hosted lavish banquets, networked with elite Roman politicians, and even heavily influenced local fashion trends with her distinct Egyptian aesthetics. But she was certainly not welcomed by everyone. Elite Roman women were particularly frustrated because Cleopatra was so radically different, confident, glamorous, and completely unbothered by standing out. During her extended stay, she closely watched Caesar's meteoric political rise as he boldly declared himself dictator for life. Cleopatra genuinely hoped this massive power grab would permanently secure their political alliance. However, intense trouble was rapidly brewing. A large faction of Roman senators grew deeply terrified of Caesar's rapidly expanding authority. In 44 BCE, a truly horrific event occurred. Julius Caesar was brutally assassinated by a coalition of panicked senators. They violently attacked him right on the floor of the Roman Senate. and his shocking murder essentially paused the entire world. Cleopatra was completely shattered. She had lost her most powerful political ally and the father of her child. She instantly realized her own life was now in extreme jeopardy. Gathering her loyal servants, her precious son, and all her magnificent treasures, she hastily fled Rome and sailed straight back to Egypt. Once safely home, Cleopatra resolved to remain unbreakable. She rapidly expanded her military forces, stabilized the local economy, and took extreme measures to safeguard her son, Caesarion. Still, Cleopatra was acutely aware that Egypt remained in a highly precarious situation. Rome was unarguably the most lethal superpower on the planet, and Egypt desperately required a brand new ally. Chapter 4: Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's incredible life took yet another breathtaking and highly dramatic pivot shortly after Julius Caesar's assassination. This next chapter revolves entirely around her legendary encounter with Mark Antony, one of the most fearsome military commanders in Rome, and how their intense connection blossomed into one of the most iconic romantic tragedies in recorded history. After Caesar's demise, the Roman Republic plunged into total chaos. The top contenders fighting for power included Mark Antony, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Lepidus. Together, they forged a shaky political alliance known as the Second Triumvirate, but it was painfully obvious they deeply distrusted one another. Mark Antony was a phenomenally courageous soldier and a highly gifted battlefield commander. He was physically imposing, incredibly handsome, and overflowing with bold confidence. At this exact historical moment, Antony desperately required Egypt's financial backing. Conversely, Cleopatra urgently needed to shield Egypt from Rome's aggressively expanding military footprint. Eventually, Antony dispatched an official summons to Cleopatra, requesting a formal meeting in the city of Tarsus in modern-day Turkey to negotiate a potential political alliance. Cleopatra instantly knew this was her ultimate opportunity to thoroughly dazzle Antony. When she finally arrived in Tarsus, she executed a theatrical arrival designed to leave the entire Roman delegation completely speechless. She glided into the city's harbor aboard a spectacular golden barge, equipped with shimmering silver oars and vibrant purple sails. She deliberately dressed herself to perfectly resemble Aphrodite, the legendary Greek goddess of deep love and striking beauty. The surrounding ocean breeze was heavily perfumed with the intoxicating scent of exotic flowers. The exact moment Antony laid eyes on Cleopatra, he was completely spellbound. That exact meeting sparked the ignition of their incredibly powerful and intensely passionate romance. She gracefully invited Antony to visit her in Egypt, and once together in the magnificent city of Alexandria, they spent their days indulging in spectacular royal banquets and thrilling entertainment. Antony fell profoundly and helplessly in love with the Egyptian queen, and she deeply returned his fiery affection. Together, they fantasized about forging a unified, unstoppable mega-empire that would seamlessly rule over both Roman and Egyptian territories. Over the years, their devotion to one another only deepened, and they eventually welcomed 3 beautiful children together: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra, Selene, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Unfortunately, not everybody was thrilled about this blossoming super couple. Back in Rome, Antony's intimate alliance with a foreign queen triggered massive public outrage, most notably from Octavian. Octavian viewed Cleopatra as a massive threat and publicly accused her of actively plotting to conquer the Roman Senate. To make matters vastly more complicated, Antony was technically already legally married to Octavian's own sister, Octavia. Yet, Antony blatantly chose to abandon his Roman wife to remain in Egypt with Cleopatra. This massive public insult completely shattered the already fragile peace between Antony and Octavian. Eventually, this boiling tension permanently exploded into an all-out civil war. Octavian officially declared both Cleopatra and Mark Antony to be absolute enemies of the Roman state. Knowing their entire combined legacy was completely on the line, Cleopatra and Antony bravely began preparing their forces for the ultimate showdown. Chapter 5. The Fall of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Cleopatra and Mark Antony were fully prepared to wage a massive war for their passionate love, their grand visions, and their respective empires. However, their ultimate final chapter would be heavily defined by shocking betrayal, crushing heartbreak, and a level of sheer courage that would go on to inspire humanity for thousands of years. Octavian's ultimate goal was to violently conquer Egypt and permanently prevent Antony from acquiring any further political dominance. Cleopatra and Antony chose to confront Octavian head-on in a colossal naval clash known as the Battle of Actium, which erupted in the year 31 BCE right near the rugged coastline of Greece. The ocean was completely packed with massive warships, screaming soldiers, and deadly weaponry. Right in the middle of the chaotic bloodbath, something highly unexpected occurred. Cleopatra's royal command ship suddenly turned around and rapidly sailed completely away from the battlefield. Many historical experts suggest Cleopatra tactically retreated simply to preserve her remaining ships and save her own life. However, Antony completely misinterpreted her sudden withdrawal. He genuinely believed that Cleopatra had deliberately betrayed him. Overwhelmed by complete heartbreak, Antony's command structure totally collapsed, and Octavian's highly disciplined navy easily crushed the remnants of his fleet. Antony frantically chased after her back to Egypt. When they finally reunited, Cleopatra desperately explained her battlefield maneuvers, swearing she had never betrayed him. Antony fully believed her, but they both knew their ruthless enemies were rapidly closing the net. Octavian's massive legions violently tracked them all the way back to Alexandria. They quickly realized winning this war was now mathematically impossible. Antony heroically charged into one final, desperate military engagement, but his exhausted army was rapidly slaughtered. Heartbroken, defeated, and suddenly receiving a false rumor that Cleopatra had already committed suicide, Antony tragically chose to fall upon his own Roman sword. As he lay dying, a frantic messenger arrived with the shocking news that Cleopatra was actually still alive. His grieving servants gently carried his dying body to Cleopatra's heavily fortified hiding spot. There, the two legendary lovers shared one final, incredibly tragic moment together. Mark Antony slowly passed away right inside Cleopatra's loving arms. Cleopatra was absolutely certain that Octavian would inevitably capture her alive. She totally refused to allow him the satisfaction of parading her through the filthy streets of Rome in heavy iron chains. Cleopatra was a woman of immense royal pride and unshakable dignity. Therefore, she firmly decided to seize absolute control over her own ultimate fate. In her final breathing moments, Cleopatra meticulously dressed herself in her most magnificent royal gowns and her glittering golden crown. According to the most famous historical legends, she secretly arranged for a highly venomous snake, specifically an asp, to be smuggled into her heavily guarded chamber. With complete and total calm, she willingly allowed the lethal serpent to strike her skin, choosing to end her magnificent life completely on her own terms. When a victorious Octavian finally burst into her royal chambers, he discovered Cleopatra already deceased, resting incredibly peacefully. He was deeply shocked, but he was also profoundly impressed by her unyielding royal courage. Cleopatra's tragic passing officially signaled the permanent end of the independent Egyptian kingdom. Octavian quickly seized absolute control over the territory, firmly absorbing it as a permanent province of the rapidly expanding Roman Empire. However, Cleopatra's incredible story certainly did not die with her. Her absolutely fascinating life rapidly transformed into global mythology. She was far more than simply a wealthy queen. She became the ultimate historical symbol of female strength, incredible resilience, and brilliant courage. Cleopatra's dramatic saga clearly teaches us that even when we are directly facing absolutely overwhelming obstacles, we can stand tall and fiercely fight for our deepest beliefs. So, my wonderful friends, please let the legendary story of Cleopatra deeply inspire you to remain mentally strong, to dream incredibly big, and to absolutely never let fear stop you from moving forward. Her life may have been completely packed with brutal struggles, but it was also overflowing with profound love, soaring hope, and undeniable greatness. Be exactly like Cleopatra, completely bold, utterly fearless, and totally unforgettable. What did you genuinely think of this absolutely incredible historical journey? Isn't the magnificent story of Cleopatra truly one of the most profoundly inspiring tales in all of human history? Let her extraordinary life serve as a constant reminder that no matter how incredibly difficult your own life gets, you always possess the ultimate power to rise above it.